Welcome to this edition of 5 Good Minutes, where our guests this week are affectionately known as the brown-backed thrushes. We have 8 species of thrushes in Vermont. 2, the American robin and the eastern bluebird, are relatively easy to identify, and 1, the gray-cheeked thrush, only passes through in migration. However, the other 5 all have reddish-brown, brown, or gray-brown backs with spotting on the breast, and therefore present an identification challenge. We'll run through these 5 species, noting their plumage characteristics, their songs, and their habitats, to try to come up with some simple ways to differentiate these species in the field. The first, the wood thrush, is by far the largest of the 5 thrushes. It also has the strongest reddish coloration on the back. The eye ring is quite distinct, and the wood thrush is by far the most heavily spotted on the breast, with large spots that run from the throat to the flanks. The veery also has a reddish tint to its back. In contrast to the wood thrush, the veery spotting is limited to the upper breast. Note that the individual spots are small and indistinct. Also, the veery has no noticeable eye ring and the face is grayish-brown. One of the most distinctive aspects of the hermit thrush plumage is the reddish tail that contrasts with a gray-brown back. The spotting is intermediate between the veery and the wood thrush, and it extends partway down the breast. The hermit thrush has a relatively distinct eye ring, and notice this bird's posture. Hermit thrush often cock their tail upwards while letting their wings droop at their side. Swainson's thrush has a gray back and tail with no hint of red or contrast between the two. The spotting on the breast is also intermediate, with spots distinct and extending about halfway down the breast. The Swainson's thrush has a very noticeable eye ring, and the feathers around the cheeks have a distinctive buffy tone that gives them sort of a friendly look. The Bicknell's thrush plumage is similar to hermit thrush and Swainson's thrush. The back color is gray, but with a hint of red or brown tint to the plumage. Unlike Swainson's thrush or hermit thrush, the Bicknell's thrush has no eye ring. Also note how the cheek coloration is a gray-brown color. Like hermit thrush and Swainson's thrush, the spotting on the breast is distinct and extends about halfway down the breast. To review, the 5 brown-backed thrushes can generally be distinguished by looking at 3 key parts of their plumage: the back, the breast, and the face. If you can get a look at these 3 body parts, you should be able to identify your bird. With back color, the reddish tint on the wood thrush and the veery separate these 2 species from the other 3. The spotting on the breast is similar in hermit thrush, Swainson's thrush, and Bicknell's, all extending about halfway down the breast. Wood thrush has extensive spotting, and veery has very little. Swainson's thrush and wood thrush have distinct eye rings. Hermit thrush has an eye ring, but it's not as obvious in these 2 species. Veery and Bicknell's do not have eye rings. If you can't figure out which species it is by these 3 plumage characteristics, note some of the other features in the column on the far right. If that still doesn't work, we have song and habitat as additional clues. One of the ways that we can visualize bird songs is through their sonograms or spectrographs. These graphs record how the vocalizations of a bird change over time with respect to the frequency at which they sing. The x-axis represents time, so the beginning of the bird's song is on the left and the end is at the right. As the frequency or pitch increases, the sounds are higher on the y-axis. This illustration shows some of the variation in bird vocalizations and how they are visualized on a sonogram. On the left, a whistled song that does not vary in pitch shows up as a straight line. In the blue circle, we also see a clear whistle, or a thin line, but note that we can see variation in pitch or frequency. The vocalizations with the wide bands are sounds in which birds are singing out of both sides of their syrinx to create harmonics. Let's listen to the songs of our thrushes while we look at their sonograms. The wood thrush has a series of very short introductory notes, followed by a melodic warble, and then ends with a harsh trill, with lots of harmonics or overtones. The veery is one of the most distinctive bird sounds in eastern North America. Although it's easy to hear the distinctive downward spiral, the sonogram helps us notice that the notes are distinctive in groups or phrases. The hermit thrush has one of the most amazing songs of any bird in North America. The long whistled introductory note shows up clearly in the sonogram. The second half of the song has a series of flute-like notes that have an ethereal quality. Notice in this sequence of 3 songs that the intro note sound starts on different pitches, and each set of flute-like notes is different. The Swainson's thrush is sort of a reverse veery. Here we have a series of phrases that are spiraling upward rather than downward. Although a backward veery is a good way to remember the Swainson's thrush song, notice how different the sonogram looks from the veery. The Bicknell's thrush is probably the most difficult song to describe. They start with a series of raspy introductory notes, and then there's an almost veery-like part of the song, followed by a slight rise in pitch at the end. Note that all of these thrushes also have distinctive call notes that can be diagnostic. The wood thrush gives a loud whip, whip, whip call. The veery gives more of a descending veer. The hermit thrush makes a variety of sounds, but most common is a low chuck note. The Swainson's thrush gives a sharp whistled whit. The Bicknell's thrush gives a veer note that is higher pitched and more emphatic than the veery. Finally, if plumage and song aren't allowing you to identify your bird, think about habitat and elevation. In the 1980s, Barry Noon conducted some great research on habitat partitioning of the thrushes along an elevational gradient. Even better, he did research in Vermont. The graphs show the relative abundance of each of the thrushes along an elevational gradient on Camel's Hump and Mount Mansfield. The pattern is quite distinctive, with veery at the lowest elevations, wood thrush a little bit higher, hermit thrush at mid elevations, and Swainson's thrush and Bicknell's thrush at the highest elevations. We can also follow this elevational partitioning with some differences in habitat. Veery are typically found in wet habitats or riparian zones. Wood thrush almost always in deciduous forests. The hermit thrush is found in mixed coniferous deciduous forests. Swainson's thrush and Bicknell is almost always in coniferous forests. In Vermont, Bicknell's thrush are generally limited to mountains over 3,000 feet. So thanks to our guests, the brown-backed thrushes, for joining us for 5 good minutes. We'll see you in the field.